How would you be treated if your child were found dead in your home and there was no evidence to place anybody else in that house?
Now here it is a year and a half later. There have still not been any arrests. My guest has been referred to as the Sherlock Holmes of forensic medicine. Dr. Cyril Wecht is a doctor, a lawyer, and a master storyteller, and a coroner of Allegheny County, and the author of a book. The title, Cyril, I think the country is begging an answer to this question. Who killed JonBenet? What made you write this book?
Do you believe this case will ever be solved?
Solved? No. I think that it can still be, however, probed, and I think that the charges should be brought against both of the Ramseys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. What is frankly astounding about this interview is when it was made and what was known at that time. It was made 1.5 weeks after Boulder PD made their 2-day presentation to Alex Hunter and his team. Remember, that was brought up in the Netflix series. You know, the presentation in early June 1998. And frankly, the only person who seemed to not know what to do with all of the evidence presented in June 1998 was Alex Hunter. But let's come back to the question. What compelled this doctor, this lawyer, to write a book this soon about little JonBenet Ramsey?
Well, I got started on her in early January of 1997, almost a year and a half ago. I got a call from a reporter at Globe, whom I did not know, asking if I would look at some pictures of a murder case. They brought them the next day, and it turned out to be JonBenet.
So Dr. Wecht is obviously talking about autopsy pictures. He was shown autopsy pictures. And that is pretty incredible if it's true. Early January 1997, he started writing a book in early January 1997. This means he started writing the book barely a week after the incident, and perhaps a few days after John and Patsy went onto CNN to tell their story, a PR disaster, as you may recall, for the first time. And so that is how Dr. Cyril Wecht, the famous American pathologist, got drawn into the Ramsey saga. Very early, he saw post-mortem images of JonBenet Ramsey, and one can imagine, as a pathologist, what he was seeing was something he'd never seen before in his career. Well, could he explain it? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome to the many of you who have subscribed. By the way, I'm doing a parallel series to this case on the Gabby Petito case. So if you know nothing about that case, I do suggest you start watching some of the videos that I'm dealing with now, which are in a way introductory. Remember, the Ramsey case, certainly the coverage of it on this channel isn't going to last forever. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please hit the thanks button and let's get started. Now, you would think if anyone could fathom this case, it would be a doctor, a lawyer, and someone who had taken a keen interest in this case in real time from the get-go. An interest sufficient to publish a book by June 1998. And Dr. Cyril Wecht is a peripheral character to this case, but he's certainly a pretty well-educated one, both, as I say, in the law and in medical forensics. Now, as far as I know, Wecht is the only doctor and also the only lawyer to ever write a book on the Ramsey case. And here's a disclaimer, I haven't read it. In this analysis, we're going to deal with this interview he gave in June 1998, where he reveals around 11 bombshells, 11 sparkling insights from this doctor lawyer who has followed this case since the very beginning. Now remember, this is a crucial time. It's mid-1998. Even the Ramseys are bringing out their Apologia, JonBenet's America at the same time. This is when the whole Ramsey case was hanging in the balance. The police would make their 2-day presentation, and Hunter would twiddle his fingers for a spell, trying to decide what the next step would be. And so when Wecht gives this interview, it's literally a couple of days after that. This case is literally hanging in the balance. And so what's really interesting here is Wecht, not only a doctor but a lawyer, expressing his professional opinion here on what he thinks of the Boulder DA, what he thinks of the Boulder DA in real time. And you know what? He doesn't mince his words. Okay, and that brings us to 11 bombshells from the forensic pathologist. Number one, Wecht had his doubts about whether anything would ever happen. What do you think he meant by that?
I wanted to write the book because I felt, number one does not know as we sit here today.
What do you think he means by that? One does not know. And here's the rub. It doesn't mean one does not know what happened to JonBenet. He means one does not know whether what happened to JonBenet will ever be prosecuted. And that's a totally different kettle of fish.
Whether anything will ever happen in a definitive nature, although I have some belief that it will, and I'll mention it later. So the idea, well, why not wait until later? You know, that would mean maybe wait forever.
And I mean, isn't that exactly what has happened? We are waiting for this case to be resolved, and aren't we waiting forever? And isn't that by design? Someone wants us to wait forever. Number two, Wecht describes the Ramsey case as truly unique.
Number two, it's a unique, truly unique murder case.
He's right, and I think this aspect is very underestimated. We talk about how Boulder PD botched the case, and we roll our eyes at Linda Arndt rolling her eyes, or Steve Thomas stabbing an accusatory finger at Patsy on Larry King. But the case really is bizarre. The Ransom note alone deserves an Oscar for the best special effects, or possibly the worst special effects in a true crime drama. The pageantry in this case is off the scale. I mean, we've seen staging. In other cases, we've never seen staging like this. The fact that you have a legendary detective coming into this case, and none of the cops seem to believe him, and he ultimately fails to solve his own case. You know, it's because this is a unique case where nothing is what it seems. And if you just take that and you accept that, well then because of that, no wonder in the fairly bucolic setting of Boulder, with the cops innocently going about their business in the relatively murder-free environment beneath the Flatirons, well, they weren't prepared for what was about to hit them, even before dawn on the morning of December 26, 1996.
Oh, you're not prepared for this.
Number three, Wecht notes that the ransom note was written using the left hand, and that already narrows down the potential number of ransom note writers to someone who is left-handed, or, for that matter, ambidextrous.
You have a lot of first-hand knowledge that you share with your readers in this book.
Yes, including, by the way, a copy of the autopsy report and a copy of that ransom note, quotation marks,
Is that the most incredible?
Now, again, remember this is June 1998, and Wecht mockingly refers on camera to the ransom note using air quotes. I don't blame him. But what has happened since 1998? You have Court TV thinking that the ransom note is not only legitimate, but written by Gary Oliva. Really, has Gary Oliva been arrested?
No.
He took more than a half an hour writing with his left hand. Then, after having written the note, you know what he forgot? He forgot to take the child with him.
Number four, no evidence of an intruder.
Think about it.
Cyril, how about the fact that there was snow on the ground? There are no footsteps.
No,
footsteps.
This is also an aspect that seems to be just forgotten about or underestimated or minimized by literally everybody. Journalists, investigators. You know, the other day I was walking with my dog early in the morning, and, you know, I certainly wasn't walking going, well, I don't see any footprints, or I do see footprints. I walked over a stretch of grass, and when I turned back, I saw my own footprints very, very clear, left on the grass. And that is when you noticed, well, I see my footprints, I don't see anyone else's. And that is, I think, exactly what happened with these investigators. Wow, I've left a very clear trail. How come this person that we're looking for didn't?
No
None.
footsteps.
No
coming into the
fingerprints
house.
in the house. Not a thread, a fiber, a hair. Not a biological specimen of sweat, saliva, semen, or blood. This person who had the incredible ability, agility, adroitness, and cleverness to come into the house, leaving no point of breaking and entering, no point of exiting, who knew where to go to the bedroom, could take her from the second floor to the basement without causing any disturbance, could engage in this game.
It's an interesting turn of phrase, engage in a game. Who do you think he's referring to there?
This is the same person who forgets then to take the body.
So can you see what he's doing? He's trying to express, he's trying to contrast the brilliance of this criminal in his ability to leave no trace of himself, and then he leaves this absolutely vulgar, explicit trace of himself in terms of this ransom note, unnecessarily long. Much ado about nothing, and it turns out to be bogus because JonBenet is in the house to begin with. Was that also a clumsy mistake from this clever perpetrator? Now, if you think about it, in a real sense, the only clue we have of the intruder is the note. So obvious, so unsubtle, and of course Patsy can't be conclusively identified as the note's author, but she can't be excluded as its writer either.
So easy. So simple.
Number 5, why haven't Boulder PD been able to make a case against the Ramseys?
Boulder police feel that they have made a case sufficient to proceed, and they've been knocking on the door of the DA for more than 1 year.
Correct. Number 6, Wecht's opinion on Alex Hunter.
It is the DA, Alex Hunter, who has dragged his feet.
Okay.
And now you get into some interesting questions. Why?
Okay. Now, recently, a lot of experts were brought in to
2.5 weeks ago, Monday and Tuesday in
And I
Boulder.
think Barry Scheck was there, Dr.
Yes,
Lee. They're
right.
both colleagues of yours.
Yes.
They were brought in to help the DA decide whether there was enough evidence to seat a grand jury.
Yes.
I mean, does he need
Well,
to convene a group of experts to make that
No,
decision?
of course there's...
And the interview is absolutely right to laugh at this idea. While I think we need to get some experts in to decide whether we have enough evidence. And think about the irony of what Alex Hunter said at the end of the day. You know, we do not have sufficient evidence. Wow, okay. That in itself is an incredibly hard to believe statement to make, especially regarding this case.
If that gives him the window dressing that he feels he needs, fine.
Did you catch that? Because this is an amazing, perhaps even scornful statement by Dr. Wecht. It suggests, certainly in his opinion, what Hunter was doing was a kind of legal pageantry, a sort of legal PR exercise.
Well, you're not wrong.
And then the good Dr. Wecht makes this prediction.
As I sit here with you today, that before the end of this month, Alex Hunter will announce that he is turning the case over to the grand jury.
And of course, that is pretty much exactly what did happen. Now, what's interesting isn't that Hunter turned the case over to the grand jury, but his reluctance to do so, how long it took him to do what seemed to be obvious to everyone else, what he needed to do. Number 7, affluence and police bungling, similarities to the OJ case.
Do you see any similarity between this case and the OJ case? Money buying justice, maybe?
There are some similarities.
You were very involved in
To
the OJ
begin
case.
with, the bungling at the scene. And the delay in bringing in appropriate experts and the failure to recognize and collect evidence in proper fashion. So you've got a big similarity there. And then the question of affluence and so on, and the reticence of the police to make a move with people who are prestigious, affluent, prominent in the community. Oh, indeed, there are some striking similarities.
And I don't think it's an accident that Patsy Ramsey mentioned the OJ case during her very first interview. It almost was like a warning. Do you really want to go down this legal route with us? And what do you think the answer is? Did anyone really want to, given where we are now? I still think, as I think Steve Thomas does, it wasn't the cops who bungled this case, it was the DA. Number 8, Wecht predicts indictments for the Ramseys.
Well, I think it'll go to the grand jury. Then you won't
by
hear
the end of the
anything.
year?
There may be a leak or two, and then they'll take their time. They move slowly in Boulder. By the end of the year, you're going to get indictments.
Well, it took even longer than that. It took another 10 months longer than Wecht predicted, but he was right. In a fashion, there were indictments that were just not ultimately signed. Number 9, Wecht felt that John was a logical suspect, and this, of course, isn't in the interview. It is from Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. Now, I must admit, I also suspected John for about the first 5 minutes, and John was the first person I suspected when I first dealt with the Ramsey case, maybe for the first week when I first researched this case. If there was a SA aspect to the case and no evidence of an intruder, well, who did that leave? And so in this sense, John starts off as an obvious suspect when you don't really know that much about this case. I don't know what Wecht believed after having written the book. As I say, I haven't read it, but I'd say he has a problem if John was still his prime suspect 18 months later. I do think it's interesting that Wecht believes in prior SA, but him being right on that score might be due to his opinion on John, which to me undermines his opinion on prior SA. Number 10, Wecht seems to see the SA as a game gone astray. Now, the housekeeper seemed to think that the injury to JonBenet was inflicted with a flashlight as punishment for bedwetting. Well, as dumb as that idea sounds, well, she seemed to get it from somewhere else. Wecht seems to imagine not only SA at the time, but as I say, prior SA as well. And then the last thing I want to bring up, the ligature around the right wrist.
They wanted my interpretation. These pictures showed the little girl with the rope around her neck and around the right wrist. And
now, on the one hand, I really appreciate Wecht's attention to detail. On the other hand, I don't appreciate him calling this thing about a rope. That's the word he uses, rope, around JonBenet's right wrist. The significance of this is that it goes to the scale of the crime. I mean, how loosely was it tied, for example? Why was there a heart drawn on her left hand? Because there's a mismatch between how loosely the ligature is around her hands compared to her neck. But the thing I really don't like is Wecht referring to the ligature as a rope. And I mean, details matter. It wasn't a rope, it was a nylon cord, barely more than a loop of white string. But what's interesting is that he was also supplied with leaked documents as well as photos of the inside of the Ramsey house. And so do you see what we're dealing with? A coroner, a pathologist, a doctor who performs autopsies who is saying, I see these injuries, but I need additional context. Let's see the girl's bedroom. Let's find out who these people are and how they lived. Let's look at all the evidence. Let's look at this ransom note. Now, I'm not going to take it further than that. I think Wecht's insights as a lawyer are better in this case than his insights as a doctor. I think a better person to consult when it comes to the SA narrative is the coroner, the man who performed the autopsy. I think it was the morning of December 27th. He's almost the only person to have seen firsthand what was done to JonBenet, I mean doctor, that saw this. And that person was John Mayer. And we'll be dealing with him in the next analysis. Thank you for listening. Look out for the next video on Gabby Petito, and I'll see you guys next time.